Live from Sticky Paws Studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, it's The Big O Show.
Hi, this is The Big O. Welcome to the show. Today we have a great guest that I'm excited to have. First of all, he's young, he's Latino, and he's running for president. So, without further ado, hello, Frankie. How are you?
Hello. Thank you so much, Odie, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited to have you. I was reading your bio and your website on all your points, and my gosh, I have to tell you, you're right on every point that I've been thinking of, and I've talked to several other candidates as well, and also the candidates that are also running. But before I continue and I get all excited with questions, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I want to make sure that the people know who you are and where you come from, and a little bit about you.
Of course. So I was born in New York native.
New Rican.
Oh, yeah, all day. And I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, and then wasn't the best area, still not the best area, which is why I tried to run for Congress and change that area prior. Then we moved to Long Island, which is just literally down the block from it. And I was able to overcome a lot of obstacles, specifically because my mom, we were, single family household. My father was incarcerated my whole life. For the most part, I got him back earlier in my adult years. And I am the first Puerto Rican to ever run for president, which was incredible because I had no idea. Being a colony for over 125 years, I assumed somebody might have taken that leap or jump, but no. And in fact, even along the two-party lines, there's only been, in the history of America, 5 Latinos to ever run. And I'm the second one on the Democratic line.
I believe it was, and I actually met him when I worked at UNLV in 2006, 2000, Governor Richardson.
Yep. It was Richardson.
Yep.
It was
Obama. He was on the ticket with, it was Richardson, Obama, and I forgot who the other one was. Those are the only 2 I remember. But they had visited the campus, and we held an event for Governor Richardson there. And it was, he was excited to be running and be representing, all Latinos in the United States, because whether you like it or not, or whether you agree with it or disagree with it, we make up mostly about 50 or 60% of the population in the United States.
And Texas, actually, the Latino population has now surpassed the white population. So they are the majority in Texas right now. And even with being, quote unquote, a minority, it doesn't change the fact that Latinos contribute the most to this economy. We are the biggest spenders here. I believe it's around $3.5 trillion a year that comes straight from the pockets of Latinos.
Yeah, no, we've made an impact. Being Cuban and coming in 1967, I saw how Miami was built. And when people say, wow, Miami, yeah, Miami is Miami now. But in 1967, la calle Ocho no era nada. Until those Cubans came and they started working it and doing the hand-rolling tobaccos and the Cuban sandwiches, la frita, all those kind of food and beverage establishments that are now, Iconic, and exactly, in la calle Ocho. So, and then where did you go to school by any chance, just out of curiosity?
High school, I went into in Long Island, Valley Stream. College, I also went to community college there. It's a 2-year university in Garden City, New York, so also New York. Then what I did was I was going to go to Hunter College in the city for law, because given my father's situation, I've always wanted to be a legislator and be in some kind of way to change the systems and be able to give back to the community. However, at that time, I started putting my foot into the door through experiential marketing. And it was a great way to meet folks. It was great income at the time, like it was, especially for someone my age. And then I started really investing my time in that. And then I got an opportunity, as soon as I graduated with my associates, I got an opportunity to go on my first ever national tour for one company. And I was like, you know what? I could always go back to school, but when am I going to get this experience? And this is only going to lead to pathways. And so it did. I took the tour over going to Hunter, and it was amazing. It's the first time I got to experience pretty much almost the whole country. And it was cool with that program because that was a medical-based one. And so what we did was we partnered up with a pharmaceutical company who had a chain of small mom-and-pop pharmacies. And so they offered different discounts as long as they were part of their network so that they can compete with some of the bigger pharmacies. So the cool thing with that marketing tour was typically after that, all of my tours took me to big cities and all the popular places, but this one took us to little rural areas all over the country, and it was the dopest experience ever, because then you get to see what real Americans are like, and what really matters to folks, and you get down and see a lot of the culture, and I loved it. So then later on, I decided, because my mother always had a passion, you know, she was the first to graduate in her family. So
I was the first one too.
Yeah, it's something remarkable, and it meant a lot to my mom, because that education is what helped her take us out of poverty and give us a better life. And so one of the things she always said, I want my kids to go to college. And so I didn't need my degree. I was successful in my business. I was successful in my career. And I said, no, I'm going to do it for my mama. So I went and I got my bachelor's online in economics and business.
Wow. I applaud your mom for that, because same as me, I was the first college graduate in my family. So my mom was really proud. I graduated high school. She was super proud because she never got to graduate high school. So I get that whole thing. So family's important. And I can tell in your voice that, you know, you care deeply about your mom, and your mom was the what I call the foundation of the family. And in almost every family, it's the woman that, you know, we just take it upon ourselves to say, hey, this is the way you're going to go. Whether you're a boy or a girl, when a Cuban or a Latina mom calls you by your first name, you better answer quickly. Yeah. So that kind of thing kept us in our path to make the right choices and get to where you are now. So now we've covered that part. What made you get into running for president?
So initially, I ran for Congress, and the only reason why I did, because I've been a lifelong activist. You know, obviously, we had some systematic barriers in my family, so I've always been dedicated to it. And even though I didn't pursue my pathway to law, I found ways to be involved in politics without having to be involved with politics. So one thing that I learned is that, you know, a lot of state legislators love when people write bills for them. And it's less work they got to do, and they get all the praise, and it's great. And I'm happy because I get some changes too. So what I would do is I would draft certain legislations, and I chose different perspectives and wordings that were untraditional. Because when I jumped into the field, I'm like, how long have y'all been fighting for this cause? And nothing's been done. And why? I was like, well, because you guys are approaching the same politicians every single time. You're not breaking the barriers. You're not going to talk to the other side to say, hey, where can we meet in the middle? And you're not using the right terminologies. And then so we started switching up, and then we started getting things passed. What really, really, really impacted me was I started thinking that maybe I should run for something. And so I started getting more physically involved in politics. And then the pandemic hit, which devastated my business, because my business was great for, marketing is depression proof, recession proof, but pandemic proof, not so much.
No.
And so I learned the hard way there. But what was cool is another vendor and company that I've worked with in the past had a whole bunch of vehicles that they used to wrap all marketing vehicles and put them on the road for other companies. That was their bread and butter. And so obviously they were impacted too, but they were smart and innovative. And what they did was they realized that there was a need for COVID testing. So they went and they repurposed all of their vehicles to be mobile COVID testing sites. I know we had them all over New York. I don't know if Vegas had them here.
We had some here, yeah.
So they were one of those companies that had those contracts. They got an even larger one, and I took it as a sign, because at the time, the business was starting to come back. And so they contacted me. They said, hey, we have this position. They couldn't tell me much about it, and now I understand why. But initially, it wasn't the highest paying contract that I was being offered at the time. And there's also the least amount of information. So I was like, you know what? For some reason, I was like, before I even turn or make a decision, I was like, where are you guys going to send me? And he's like, well, we're going to send you to the Mexican border. And I was like, you know what? Take it. And I took the presumably lower contract because I wanted that experience, and I wanted to see for myself what's going on there. So I thought. And then I got down there and really saw what was going on, because prior to that experience, I had only the news to rely on, and everything that was being fed to me, and how I perceived things was way different than when I actually got there and experienced it. And the fact that I saw that the media was not changing while I was witnessing in front of my eyes what was actually going on, I said, if they're not going to do something, then I'm going to do it. And then I ran for Congress. And my opponent, who, not sure if this is fully true, but it was told to me that in the 25 years he's been in Congress, he's never challenged anybody's petitions or anybody's candidacy. And so I got challenged. I was the first one in his entire 25 years ago. So I was flattered, I guess, but it created a lot of different barriers, and it made it very, very expensive. So then I made a decision and to not get discouraged. I did not fight his nonsense. And I said, you know what? I have a very powerful voice. I have a lot of great stances. I said, Congress is 435 members. Why am I going to let my voice be drowned out by 435 or 434? Instead, I'm going to take the main stage and I'll be the only voice to be heard.
Wow, I like that. That's powerful. That's realization, that moment. What's that called when you have when you have an epiphany?
Manifesting it?
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah, that is awesome. So now let me go now to your current, okay? I checked out your website. I am all educational, okay? For 27 years, I worked for government. I oversaw federal programs, youth, adult, and dislocated worker. I worked with youth that were homeless. I've pretty much experienced it all. I was never in the trenches. I was always in the background, making sure that money was able to be funded into these organizations, okay? So education is very important. And when you brought up COVID, it brings the fact that our kids are behind. Maybe 1, 2, some even 3, 3 grades behind. How do you see the system changing, or how do you see where we can improve the system so we get up to par?
Well, what obsessed me with education as a whole anyways, I'm from New York, we have the biggest education system. And COVID, they put them behind, but they were already behind before. And that's one thing that I view on. My mother was an educator, lifelong teacher. And, I learned so much from her, but at the same time, our teachers are underpaid, number one. They're overworked. These children need resources. And instead, we're just packing them into these classrooms and, they're not getting the individualized attention that they need to be able to learn to their highest potential. Another thing is with our education system is it's outdated. We're not moving as fast as everything else is with technology, different learning styles. Like you see, even with colleges and some of these companies, they're realizing that kids need to be entertained or engaged differently. That's why they're like, you know what? Some people aren't built for school. That's why some of these big corporations are taking certificates over degrees now, because they know that they're able to do it. And so we're putting these kids through this retro, outdated system, which is boring, inactive, and which actually hurts them even mentally and emotionally, which gets them why they're all on these medications, because now everybody has ADHD because our system, because the kids are bored. That's what it is. The kids have the potential to learn. You just have to engage them in the right way.
Engage them differently.
And there are plenty of schools that are testing this in other markets. And I'm like, if you see the results and data shows, follow the data and do it. There's schools that they basically test the children in the sense of how their learning style is and what works best for their individual needs. And then they break them up into classes for like-minded students that learn that certain way, and they change the curriculum that way. And so I'm all for that. I'm all for innovation and changing certain things. I'm also, one of the things I loved is that I got to sit on a lot of the PTA and I forgot what they're new called, the groups of teachers, the CECs. And so I got a lot to sit on those meetings, and all of them, almost everyone was like, listen, we know that school may not be, or college may not be the route for kids. If you've accepted that as fact and you understand that, then why are trades taken out of schools? Teach them how to differentiate their future.
It's so funny you say that, because my husband's a teacher. He just retired. Well, he just retired a couple years back, but my family as well are educators, except for myself, but I still work with youth. One of the things that I've always said, okay, is that within our educational system, workforce has to be married to education, because like you said, not every child, and let me tell you, you're not the only one that got a lot of backlash for saying this, because I said that many years ago at a meeting at UNLV in workforce, and I said, not every child is going to go to college, and those people went crazy. A lot of Latinos did. How can you say that? How can I say that? Very simple, because some of these kids don't know even what they want to do. So if in the 9th grade, okay, it is a mandatory course, required credit course to take workforce readiness, career explorations, and take a look at what short-term certifications are. Because like you and I were just saying, if the employer needs these certain skills, and these skills can be completed in a 6, 9, or 12-month program, why in the world are we sending the kid for 2 years to college and they still need the work experience for that job. So I am totally on 100% agreement with you.
And the same with college. Like, I get it because I'm running on the Democratic line. Of course, everybody's like, are you going to forgive college debt, college debt, college debt? And I was like, I'm going to create plans and platforms for it, because I'm all for fairness. If you do something for one, you must do it for all. And so what's happening now is you have kids, and I get it, inflation changed a lot of things, but at the same time, you have people who were financially responsible, and they paid their student loans, but they get nothing in sense. So my plan actually gives them everybody the same exact amount of relief, including people who were financially responsible, and they get it over a tax credit over so many years that they can write it off and get some kind of benefit back. But same thing with colleges. It's like you have these kids with, I think it's like high 80s or low 90% of people who don't graduate and don't even end up in the field of their
degree.
And some of these degrees take 6-7 years to get. And because they're fluffed up with all of those core unnecessary classes, like I had to take gym for my associates. Like I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I'm athletic. I love playing sports. But why?
Well, I always cracked up about I called it the ology series. Anthropology, psychology, and sociology. Why do I have to take the three of them? Why couldn't I just take like one of them, or whatever? But like you, I went to CSN, College of Southern Nevada, got my 2-year degree and transferred into UNLV so I could finish my degree. Now, I was in my later years. I graduated from UNLV when my daughter graduated from high school, but it was never too late. And again, like your mom, I needed that degree to move me up into that next level so I could get a decent retirement and decent wage of living, So, and now our teachers here in Vegas just got a raise, so that's kind of nice. But it gives the new teachers the raises, but not the ones that have been in the trenches and really, working hard all these years. So I like to see how they can get compensated as well because they've been there.
You have to. The teachers, it is proven that your work ethic and performance is better when you feel well compensated. And so if teachers are feeling undervalued, underpaid, now granted, the blessing we have is we have a nation full of incredible teachers who actually love what they do. They love engaging with their kids and they love seeing the impact and difference. My mom was one of those people. My mom, she talked about her class kids as if they were us and we had siblings, so all the years. And she's still, years down the line, she was an elementary school teacher. My mom is in her 70s now, and she still remembers. She still remembers, and she still meets her students from way back when, all throughout the years. And, they call her, they talk to her, so... and I see it because she's a great mom,
Yeah, that's how I see it with hubby. We've gone to the mall and Coach, or Mr. C, and he turns around. Thank you. He was the best teacher I ever had, and it always brings tears to my eyes because there's nothing better for that one student to have been touched by just that one teacher. And it makes a heck of a difference.
It does. You know how many times I talk about my favorite teachers and things that I've learned?
Oh, I remember them. I grew up in Miami. I grew up in Liberty City. So you talk about where you grew up. I grew up in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s in Liberty City. So I remember Comstock Elementary. I remember my first teacher, Miss Garcia. I remember my third grade teacher because she was the one that taught me how to do cursive writing. And then when I got in, and Miami had a funky system, right? So you went to elementary school 1st through 4th. Then you had a 5th and 6th grade center. Then you went to middle school for 7th and 8th, and then you went to another school for 9th grade. And then you went into high school in the 10th. Here in the West Coast, you go into high school in the 9th grade. So it makes a heck of a difference as far as maturity, I think.
Yeah. My school, high school, in my district, we had 2 schools that ran it the same way, and then we had one in the middle. Central had Memorial High School and Central High School. So Memorial was 7th and 8th grade, and then Central was 9th through 12th. My school was a conglomerate of both. So I actually started in my same high school. I was there from 7th grade all the way.
Oh, wow.
And it was great because I grew up with all the other students, with all the teachers there. And I think that's what really helped us have such amazing teachers is they were able to physically see the progress. Because some teachers I had in 7th grade, I had them also again in 11th grade. And it was great to be able to build those bonds. I loved my teachers. I thought I went to a really great school and I was blessed. I'm forever grateful that my mom made that conscious decision to take me out of the bad schools to bring me into at least somewhere where I can get a really good education.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, you talked about your experience on the border. Okay, let's get to immigration because, that's God, that's a hot issue, but it's been a hot issue for many, many years. And from my experience, when we came in 1967, we came in the last freedom flight in 1967. So it was my mom and I and my uncle on my father's side. We got to Miami International, went straight to the Red Cross, got all our shots. They had to call someone that would sponsor you. In that case was my tia Adela, which God bless her, she's still alive. She's my only living relative on my father's side. And then you had 6 months to find a place to live, which, let me tell you, they told us where to live. So they had these certain places, and in our case, it was Liberty City, where they placed a whole bunch of Cuban families there. One of them being Munoz Studio, which Munoz was a photographer in Cuba and his family. And so we kind of grew up, and he opened his photography studio like, I don't know, it was on that block ever since I can remember. But after I started, it wasn't even kindergarten. They kind of got us together, and Miss Garcia took all of us that were like kindergarten and first grade and taught us English, and then dumped us into third grade, being fully, versed in being able to read it and write it, okay, and speak it. But my mom had to report to immigration for the first 5 years or 3 years, I can't remember, 3 or 5, every week.
Every week?
Every week. She would pick me up from school. We would take the bus to La Casa de la Libertad on Biscayne Boulevard, the House of Liberty. That's the proper translation. Mm-hmm. And my mom had to show a pay stub or a letter from her employer saying she was working. And I had to bring a current school, by my teacher, she's going to school, until they gave us the green card. Now, I was talking to another person that said back in those days, they were ready for that influx from, Fidel taking over. So they were ready for all those Cubans coming in, right? Mm. But now it's not just one group or one population coming in. Now we've got them from everywhere, and they're all going right there to the border. So how do you see that evolve? How do you, I just can't see how we fix that. It's broken.
I got plenty of plans. The problem, I'll tell you what the biggest problem is we're not trying to fix it. There's no incentive to fix it. At the end of the day, every government organization is a business, and it runs like a business. Their job at the end of every year is to find ways to get more money and to make their agency grow for better job security and, for their agency. And that's what happens is right now we're getting out-hustled by the cartels. The cartels are running our entire immigration system. And like even in El Paso, they know that the heads of the cartels live on the state side. They run all their business from here. They live their big cushy mansions, and they're enjoying their life here, influencing a lot of our politicians. That's why nothing gets changed. And what was cool was my experience is I got to see it for myself. And I asked questions, and Border Patrol was actually very, very receptive. I would ask them, like, for example, we went to where the Trump wall was, where they built the $25 million mile-long wall, which ends, and then there's this huge gap between it. And I'm like, everybody praised this wall. And I'm like, that's it? Mm-hmm. And in fact, I'll show you a picture later. I actually, to prove a point, I jumped the wall.
No kidding.
Yeah, I jumped the wall, and it was funny because that's how I met this guy. Probably shouldn't say his name, but I met one of the water authority guys because I jumped the wall, not realizing that somebody was watching. And so here comes this federal agent seeing me jump into Mexico, and he comes in, and he was the coolest dude. He was like,
dude, what are you doing?
He goes, if you wanted to cross, you could have just told me. He goes, I got the key. He goes, nobody ever goes that way. And it was the coolest guy. And so we sat there, we talked, and I asked, and he's great at his job because we got along so well. I had a bunch of my friends there. We asked a whole bunch of questions, and we hung out with him. And we're like, dude, how often are you out here? And he was like, I'm here on these days here. And so in El Paso, there's not much to do. So we had to find our own excitement. So we did. We went to go visit him every once in a while. So we brought like tables with foods and tacos and everything. We would just hang out with him while he was working and just have a little party right in front of the Trump wall. And even with all the noise we were making and everything, he mid-conversation goes, hold on, turns around, flashlight into the water, 9 people right there
kidding.
In the Rio Grande. I'm like, how did he hear that? And so he flashed them in, and he went over, crossed over, talked to them a little bit, and then they left backwards. So I was like, what was that? And he was like, well, we give them the opportunity. We have option. They haven't crossed technically yet. So they could either go back, try again later, or they can cross and we can detain them. And I was like, there's 9 people. Like, what happens if you detain them? Well, if we detain him, then he doesn't have the authority to detain him or arrest him. So he has to call in
the U.S. Immigration
Border Patrol.
Patrol.
And because there's that many, this guy has to come. Another unit has to come until they can fit all those
all
people.
them in a van and then take them to the holding center or
and
whatever.
so then I'm like, okay, so they pull him from these here. Who's monitoring that? He goes, oh, nobody. And he goes, and they have people. They have people in the mountains. They look over, they're watching. And when they pull those resources, they radio to their people to get them over the thing. And it's crazy because, it's not a 15-foot wall everywhere. There are some fences and stuff, but they use it's super innovative. It's like a thick, like the Palm Sunday where it's like that palm leaf?
Yeah.
But it's like a stronger version of it. And they can basically make like a quick one-time ladder that they go and just cross over with these little...
Like a rope type thing. Oh, wow.
And it's super, super impressive. And then sometimes, obviously, they'll cut through the fences, but they have it down to a system. And so when he's saying it like nothing, nobody's really watching. And I'm like,
it's crazy.
That's a problem.
See, I always wondered, and again, I'm not a specialist, but just from the outside looking in, is there has to be some technology that we can track those that we catch them, they have records or they're wanted, they get sent back. But if they try it again, we have them, oh no, este fulanito or fulanita, and they need to go back. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we have anything, nothing in place. We don't have enough judges or whatever those are called.
Correct.
What are those called? Border judges?
Immigration judges.
Immigration judges.
But we do, but that's the thing, is we don't have enough judges, that's true. But we do keep record of them. Like, everybody's under this mindset that everybody just comes parading over the border and they go, hey, welcome, here's a bus, go in. No, everybody gets processed. Mm-hmm. Don't talk about it. But I was at one of the processing centers. So they come in, they get processed, they have documentation. Now, whether or not that documentation is actually theirs, that's where we have to do our investigation for it. But that's theirs. But everybody gets a federal A number, which is their identification number, and that's how they start their process for it.
Alien, because A is for alien.
It might be.
I think it is. It's for the alien registration number.
Could be.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then it would probably be what the A number is then.
Yeah.
And so that they get processed through, and they do it. And it's funny because the media will tell you that the Mexicans are coming over. Or Trump would say Mexico's sending their worst people over. And it's not the Mexicans, because the Mexicans, actually, it's harder for them to get here. So
it's everybody else from South America,
correct.
Even Cubans.
Yep.
I have been shocked at the amount of Cubans that are coming through Mexico. Because, once they stop the wet, dry lawland, or wet
foot, dry foot.
Thank you, wet foot, dry foot. And, people... where I worked, they used to say, why do they throw themselves in the water? Because they have to touch American soil, and that way they don't get kicked back to Cuba. Oh, so that's why they jump, and you see them going crazy trying to get to the sand.
Yeah, as long as they touch.
But once that was gone, now they're going around.
But that's the thing is, they're still protected by the Cuban American Act of 1967. They're still protected by it. So they still have certain protections that other people coming in do not.
Right.
So that's the benefit that they have. But you're right. There are different countries that people send them, and they come in like waves because the cartels are running a business.
Exactly.
And so if you'll notice, what they try to do is they fill the gaps of when people are coming, because most of Central and South America have to take that trek by themselves.
And they have to go through like the Amazon.
They have to go. It's a long journey. It takes them months to get here.
We had a young man here, a boxer, that what's that called when you leave Cuba but you do it? He boxed for Cuba.
He
defected.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he defected in, was it Venezuela, George?
I think so, yeah.
He was at the embassy in Venezuela where they picked him up and said, okay, we're going to drive you to, I forgot, it was like the point of where that jungle starts, the Amazon or whatever. Not the Amazon, no. The one that's by Colombia and all that area.
I know what you're talking
You know
about.
the one I'm talking. Anyway, so they left him and another guy there and said, okay, now you have to trek and we'll pick you up on the... He ended up going through Mexico, getting through the border, and then finding the sponsor for them to get him. But he goes, that was amazing. And he's 21. So I can imagine these moms that are going through that trek with kids.
And that's something we don't talk about. We talk about all the people who make it here, but we don't talk about the people who don't. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I realized there too. Like, there was a lot of dead bodies that would end up, so they try to swing in the Rio Grande, but in there, especially in El Paso, the currents are controlled by the dams. So sometimes you underestimate the currents, and if you can't really swim, you're going to be under the sidewalk or downtown El Paso. Every night the Mexican National Guard will go through and see if there was any dead bodies and pulling them out. one of the stories, because I would talk to the kids and everything, and the blessing that I had from being in my marketing field was I got to travel this country. So these kids are being treated like criminals, and having forced to walk in lines with their hands behind their back. And so when they got to me, it was like, no, this is playtime, and we're gonna have conversations. I'm gonna treat you like equals. We're not doing that. In fact, I would get a manifest with all of their A numbers, even how much money they came with in whatever currency it was in. And it would have their names and have their A numbers, and it would also have a number of their line order. And so I would go down and I'd be like, I'd go and verify their names. I'd be like, Jose. And he'd be like, número 14. And I'm like, no, homie.
No, tú eres 14.
Yeah, you're Jose. That's
You're
it.
Jose.
This is your name.
Yeah.
That's who you are. I'm Frankie. Let's get that out the water.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because they have different levels of Border Patrol. They have the agents, and they have the security that kind of is like the lesser paid and do all the work that the Border Patrol don't want to do. And so they treat the kids just like Border Patrol does because that's the hierarchy. But I would have noticed, like, when they eventually started, like, when we weren't allowed to touch the kids per se. But like I said, you reword.
Well, we're Latinos. We're about touching.
Yeah.
Give them a hug. You're okay.
Yeah.
Aquí estamos para ti.
And I wanted to hug these kids
But
so
you can't.
bad. I can't. So what I did say was like, all right, there's different levels of touching. Like, it's COVID testing. If I can swab their nose, I could fist bump them. And so at the end of it, fist bumped them all, and then I would see the brown
reaction
shirts.
and just like almost like a moment of.
Yeah, and
It's okay.
And it was a relief for them too, because I'll tell you the most of all the questions they could ask, because I'll always, hey, do you guys have any questions? I'll answer them, and usually they'll ask me where they're going, about it, and it's great because I'm like, oh, Chicago is cold. You're coming from Guatemala, you might make sure you
You take a jacket. Yeah.
And I would treat them that. But the hardest question to ever get, which just devastated me every time, and I only got it like maybe 6 or 7 times, but every time it's just the same impact, and it was. A lot of the kids would be like, you know what, how long until we get to the United States? And I was like, oh, you're here. This is the journey that you motivated yourself to stay dedicated to taking that crazy wild trail. Mm-hmm. I might get teary-eyed because I remember so I didn't have the greatest relationship with my father when I finally got into good stuff. And I didn't talk to him for about 5 or 6 years. And I remember this one little kid, he had to be like 7 or 8. And I was asking him, I was like, where are you going? Because most of them know they have a system. They have family here who are going to sponsor them or receive them, and Border Patrol will do their due diligence to
call that family and
get them. Yep.
Right.
And so this kid, he's very quiet, very shy, and I was like, hey, where are you going to go? And he didn't know. And I was like, well, where's your parents from? And then it was told to me because I was only dealing with the unaccompanied minors that didn't come with their family, and apparently. He didn't start the journey unaccompanied. His mother had passed away in the desert.
Ay, Dios mío.
And at that 7 or 8 years old, he had to continue the journey. Now,
I get you.
It's so. Thankfully, some of the other kids who are also going through that struggle and journey, they take them. They don't have much resources themselves, but they take them under their wing, and they guide them and help them get through process. And so that's how he got there, through the help of guidance of others, and which that's also their only protection. And now they're going to separate them and they're going to go their own ways.
Right.
And this poor kid has to go through the foster system and everything else. And it's wild. So understanding the hardship and looking at that perspective of things, I was like, if we know that this is the hardest journey for them, why are we making it even
so much
more
difficult?
Yeah. And when I was talking to, I got the pleasure to meet the ambassador of Mexico, Montezuma Barragan, last year in Albuquerque at the LULAC convention. And I pitched, and he seemed to be pretty interested and receptive to my idea. I said, right now, we understand the cartels are exploiting these people. They're making all this money.
Right.
And
because what are they called? They have a name, right?
Coyotes and...
Coyotes. I've watched all the novelas. I should know.
And then that's the thing.
The novela. It's perfect.
We have all these shows that tell us
exactly what they're doing,
and we don't do anything about it. And so, I told him, I said, my information that I got there indicated and showed me that 90-something% of my people are coming from mostly Guatemala, and the remaining from Central and South America. Yeah, we have a little tangents here and there, but majority, that high 90%, is from there. So what people don't understand is how the immigration process works. And so I love meeting people that are like, they need to do it the right way. And I'm like, great, let's talk about it. What's the right way? And they're like, well, they have to do. No, they can't just say, I want to come to America. That's not how it works. They have to try to claim asylum. At least try. Do you know the number one step to get to asylum? No. The first step to claiming asylum is you got to get to the United States. And then so they come here legally. They get to the border. They say, help me. Your law says you can help me. Help me. And they say, our law does say that. It says, we're going to get to your case. I know you're not from Mexico, but we're a little backed up because we didn't anticipate our system would bring in all these people. So we're backed up 10, 15 years. So they sit there and they say, just stay in Mexico for like 10, 15 years. In the same country that they just barely survived. They just got exploited. They probably have nothing left. They don't want them there either. And so the other alternative to expedite their case is to get here, quote unquote, illegally. So they came here with the purpose of coming here legally. And if you tell me, if I just went through all that, and you tell me that I have to wait in another country for 10 to 15 years, I'm jumping that wall. I'm going to find a way because I can't. That's survival tactics. And we're treating these people like they're villains. And because, quote unquote, they committed a crime by crossing illegally, now they're criminals.
Now, let me ask you another question because the other day, and mind you, I'm retired, so I watch a lot of news. And I try to watch Fox and CNN. I try to go back and forth. And then I just shut off and go, I'm done. But there was another huge influx of Haitians that went in through Miami, or I forgot which part, but they're coming through the waters. So that's another, it's not the Mexican border, but now we're looking at the Caribbean as an escape, and also through Puerto Rico.
But we only, and a lot of them will go to Puerto Rico because it's closer than coming here, and they can marry Puerto Ricans.
Exactly. So, I mean, I don't know. I like I said, I want everyone to read Frankie's website, take a look at all his ideas and his bills and everything he's got, because he's on the right track. And we need to make sure that we are knowledgeable and educated to make the right decision come this November, because we need new blood. We need a vision, a new vision.
Well, I got it. I got my plan. And that's the one thing that I will say, because I don't have that crazy manpower, I don't have that crazy funding, I vowed not to take any corporate funding. You know, it's tough. So what I did was, a lot of politicians talk about the what, and not the how. And so I said, look, I wrote down all my plans.
You put your money where your mouth is, because everything is on that website. Everything.
Well, most of it.
But for the most part, everything that you are campaigning on.
Correct.
And how you are going, you have a solution. And that's what you're giving me on that website, is I'm reading a solution.
And I implore, like, anybody who can go to my website. You want expansion, anything, like I said, I have it all documented. I have everything's numbered, all my different policies, what we're going to do, where we're going to get the funding for it. It all does. You know, going back to, so to immigration, the big fix is understanding why people are coming, which is for socioeconomic hardship, which is why the cartels and the gang members run rampant in Central and South America. So what I did was, my plan focuses on taking the cartel out of the problem. And so our border is 2,000 miles long. If 90+% are coming from Guatemala and Central America, let's put the processing center on the bottom of Mexico and Guatemala, which is only 500 miles. Because
before they even get to,
exactly.
Hey, that's a good...
And in theory...
Nip it in the bud before it gets any worse coming into our border.
Yep. And in theory, our immigration problem is Mexico's immigration problem. So they should be on board with it. And so what's cool about that is it's easier for us to say, hey, 90% of y'all are coming in from Guatemala. Now you can, hey, we're processing your account. Stay in Guatemala, which is their home country, less on deportation costs. And here's the thing is, if they were willing to pay the cartels this amount of money, what we can do is say, hey, we're going to have you fund our own system, your own pathway to do it. If you qualify, great. We'll take you now here, we can safely bring you to the United States. And just like we do with students, give them a loan, a low interest federal loan that says this is what we presume your asylum case is going to cost, and you could pay it over time. And that's what you'll do. And eventually, if you want to finalize your citizenship and get your green card and make it, you have to just pay off that loan. And it gives us a way to monitor them, to make them less.
Okay, but I'm going to play the devil's advocate on that. Mm-hmm. How about if Odie decides that after you got me in that plan, I made the first 2 payments, no voy a pagar más, y estoy aquí. Well, then you can track you.
We can track. We know where you are. We know the same thing. So when they come in, when you're coming with that paperwork, you're supposed to put down your your residence is, who's sponsoring you, where you're going. Same would apply. And at that point, a lot of them are coming here for work. Let's be real. So they're going to work and they're leaving. It's a sacrifice in itself. They're leaving their family behind and they're doing it. So the second part of that is those who do want to come here, we will have that tracking mechanism. And if you do deviate from it, it happens. There's
exactly
crime happens.
Right.
And now you face deportation and being barred from coming back. That is when you earned your deportation.
Yeah, okay.
Especially when we created a pathway for it. Now, the second part of it is we're sending all of these overseas jobs that have zero benefit to us except the pockets of the big corporations. So if we know that people are coming because of socioeconomic hardships from Central
Bring those
South America,
jobs back.
exactly, and allocate them where it's going to benefit us. So give tax incentives and credits for businesses to relocate, not create necessarily more jobs, but to relocate
say 500 or 600 positions.
something into those countries.
That's a good idea too. I like that. You're
then-
not telling them don't put your jobs overseas. Just keep some here to assist in this component. Now, the other thing I want to ask you about is your views on how do we fix, and I say fix for a lack of a better word, we're so split, we're so divided. I mean, right now, Santos C got won by a Democrat. So there were the Republicans last night making sure they were able to impeach Mayorkas because they were up, they did it by one vote.
Yep.
Okay. So if they would have waited till today, they probably wouldn't have been able to. So how do we get, the Dems and the reps kind of working together and forgetting this Make America Great thing, because we're all Americans, for God's sakes, and we all live in a great country. Okay. So how do we bring how do you bring it together, especially being a Latino?
So the best way, well, I'm glad you brought that up too. Yeah. The best way, and I mean this wholeheartedly, turn the TV off. Sit down at the table. Because when you actually have face-to-face conversations, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a Democrat. There's nothing wrong with being a Republican.
No.
And it's just people understanding. And the reason why I say that is because, in all honesty, if we put all of the biases and what the media tells us to believe aside, we are all down the middle. And we just lean certain different ways. I come from a justice-impacted family. I faced a lot of adversity and, grew up in marginalized communities. So I tend to lean a little bit more blue for those social programs and trying to better those communities and get us out of that hole. Now, I'm also fiscally conservative because I'm always like, hey, hold on. We got to...
That's a lot of moolah there.
Yeah. And, I like the fact that you said, because I'm Latino too, because I hate the question. So does that mean you're catering to the Latino vote? And I'm like, what is a Latino vote?
Because I'm bilingual. So this has been my beef all the time. So years and years ago, before they started marking black of Cuban descent, or they broke it down, they only had white and black, right? So I would put in my own little square that said Cuban American, because you're not counting me in that group. Well, now they're breaking it down so much that I have to read and go, wait a minute, am I white? What am I? I'm Cuban, but I'm white. I'm not black. So do I put Caucasian, or do I? Now it's getting like, okay, how do I
identify? Yeah.
How do I identify myself? Because they're just breaking it way too deep.
But that's because those are the divides that were intentionally created. And that's why, even it's funny because everybody, I hate the word minority as well. So when I was going into my communities, when I was running for Congress, it's hurtful when I can tell you where the black communities are, where the Puerto Rican communities are, where the Guyanese are.
We all know.
Yeah, I can go into where it is. And we separate and segregate ourselves. And I said, what's funny is that what they call us minorities and they group us all together.
Go figure.
But we're the ones that separate those individualized things. And instead of coming together and letting our voices heard, like me, I'm Puerto Rican. I say I'm Afro-Latino because if you look at the Taino history and how...
The Taino Indians in the Caribbean, it's like I tell everybody, listen, the slave market drove right through the Caribbean. So when you're looking at Haitians, Puerto Ricans, Bahamians, Jamaicans, Cubans, when you're looking at all those islands, what's the one thing that is almost exactly the same? Our food.
And
the
it's West
language is
African.
different, okay? The dancing. Where does our call and response come from? From the African heritage, okay? Where does our rumba and those kind of
Bomba.
dance, la cumba, all of that comes from our African descents. So when I tell people, Cubans come in 3 shades, like Puerto Ricans. We can come as fair as I am. My husband is brown, and then you could be as dark as coal and have blue or green eyes from our European influences from back in the day of Spain.
And Miami is a great tapestry of that. Like you better not speak bad about anybody in Spanish in Miami because
You never know.
They'll come back at you.
And it's funny you say that because my husband and I always teach. I call it Spanglish is the new language because I go back and forth a lot, And he always cracks up. He's like, "Oh my God, only you." But when he went to Miami, he cracked up. And this was '82. He goes into a 7-Eleven, right? And he goes to the lady. He goes, "Can I get a box of Marlboro?" At the time, he smoked, and the lady looked and go, "Una cajetilla Marlboro." And he looked at me. He goes, "Really?" I go, "Yeah, it is what it is."
It's funny because so I only keep the facial hair. I do play the role in that sense because when I ran for Congress, I was always in my suit. I had no facial hair, and I was running in a primarily black neighborhood or area. And so they were like, "Get out of here, white guy. What are you doing? We're not signing your petition. We've been through this path before." And I'm like, "No, I'm one of you." And then finally, I started dressing down and I left the facial hair because that's what the perception of Latino is.
Yeah.
And so prior to that, I was always clean shaven and nobody ever assumed that I spoke Spanish,
Right.
which was great because what I would do is that's how I used to distinguish how I would do business. Because if I walked into businesses that did speak Spanish, I would see how they treated their customers. And if they were mistreating their customers, I would leave. And it's funny because even when I would travel to Spanish speaking countries, I would gringofy my accent. So when I would go in there just to as a shock factor, I'm like, "Usted no debería hablar con ellos así." And so they were like, "Oh man, gringos no." And so I would do it in things like that. But so when I got to Miami for the first time, I remember I was like, as soon as I landed, immediately they started speaking to me in Spanish. I'm like, they know. How do they know? And then I realized no, it's just Miami. Everybody speaks Spanish.
It's funny you say that because I've experienced that because I've left what I call my dialect, my Cuban dialect. Miami has a dialect, like New Yorkers, like Chicago, and you could be a doctor and they'll say, "Man, your English is not quite," it's just a dialect. But I've dropped mine after 40 years of being in the West Coast, right? So most people don't think I'm Cuban. Yeah, Dallas, it could be any Carmona, you married into, a Latino family, right? So when we used to go to Tijuana back in the day, when the bartering and all of that, I'd talk to them in English and then they'd go and talk. And when they come back, I'd go, "Oye, usted acaban de decir que me hubieran cobrado $5 menos. ¿Usted habla español?" Uh-huh. Just because I look the way I look doesn't mean that I don't,
And it was here in Las Vegas, it's incredible that you talk about appearance-wise. Because it was the most magical thing. One of my best friends here is an immigration officer, and so she told me about the naturalization ceremonies that they had here. And I went down the courts, and I witnessed it for the first time. And I'm sitting in this room, and I promise you, if nobody opened their mouth, you would not be able to tell me who was a citizen and who wasn't.
Oh, exactly.
Because that's how diverse the room was, and that's how incredible. It was a perfect example of what America looks like.
I became an American citizen in 1979, right out of high school. I graduated in May. And in November of that year, I swore the flag. And it was one of the proudest moments of my life. I'll never forget that. It was November 11th of 1979. Those are certain days you don't forget. Yeah. That's one of them.
And it was incredible because, I've always said it, but that just fortified it. Is when I watched that ceremony, I've never seen more proud Americans. Mm-hmm. They earned it. They know what it is. And that's something I take for granted. And that's something I say when it comes to the immigration process. The only difference between myself and any of them is I was born here.
Exactly.
That's
the only difference.
So. And we need them in our lives to sit there and show us that this is why we want to be American. This is what it means to be
an American.
Because I think somewhere along the lines, we forgot that. And I think the biggest problem as Americans is that we don't have any problems. We think we do. But compared to the other struggles of people in the world, for some reason, we lack that empathy because we don't have to struggle.
Yeah,
and I've seen American people here at the slightest inconvenience. That's it. Their whole world melts down. And I'm like, I met people who lost their family in the desert.
Yeah, exactly. Come on now. Let's prioritize around here. Mm-hmm. Well, Frankie, que gusto. I am so glad that I met you. I'm so glad you came on the show today. We appreciate los pastelitos. The whole crew did. So just next time you're in Vegas, give us a call, give George, email him or whatever, and we'd love to have you back on again.
I appreciate
and anything
it.
we can help you with, let us know.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me and giving us a platform. I can't stress how important it is for us to at least have a voice. And we've been drowned out specifically for the media, especially in this election.
It's ridiculous. Oh, I know, because when I got the ballot in my house, I'm like, hold up, what's going on here? Why not? So just keep plugging along. We're proud of you.
We're doing it. We're not stopping anytime soon. So
All right.
good.
Thank you
so
Frankie.
much.
Thank you. All right, Odi Carmona, The Big O Show. Come back next week and we'll have another great guest. Thank you.